It is overtime here again at Old Favorite Friday, and we are talking about Bourbon County Stout by Goose Island. This is the last Old Favorite Friday of the year, so we decided to cap this off at the bank. This beer's been requested like 6 different times over the 2+ years that we've been doing this. So, very, very popular beer. Hugely important in the history of craft beer geekdom, if that is a term that I can throw together, or maybe heard somewhere else, I don't know. But because this beer was made for the first time in 1992, and this was possibly the first bourbon barrel beer or barrel-aged beer made in this country. I've seen some conflicting discussions about that, but I'm just going to throw that out there. At the very least, very, very early on, really the beer that made Bourbon Barrel Imperial Stout, those two things become synonymous with one another, because there was no rule that said that Imperial Stouts had to go in bourbon barrels. It seems like there is a rule now. It's a legal obligation for every brewery to have a Bourbon Barrel Imperial Stout. That is not the case. You cannot go to jail if you don't do it, but we do have Bourbon County Stout to thank for realizing how well these flavors can meld together. This beer used to be one of the most sought after beers, hardest thing to get your hands on, and now you can go into your local Total Wine & More like I just did and see cases stacked on top of cases. When we talk about Old Favorite Friday, we often talk about beers that do not get the respect that they deserve because maybe they've been around for too long or they're too ubiquitous. There is no better beer to describe it than this, because this beer is absolutely incredible and people are not as stoked as they used to be. So I've been talking for a little bit. Ralph, I know you have a little story about Goose Island, but tell me about this beer a little bit.
Yeah. So as far as the beer itself, I love this beer. I'll go into the flavors a little bit, then I'll kind of go to the story. But you very much get like I want to say chocolate brownie batter kind of thing. Like you get a little bit of caramel in this and that, but you get such a rich chocolate character. I would almost borderline say it's dark chocolate, but because of that barrel, you get that little bit of that like vanilla, and I believe this is Bourbon County, so
yep.
Obviously. Bourbon barrel, you get that vanilla, sometimes even, brain fart, even sometimes with bourbon, you'll get like a hint of coconut without them actually putting, coconut in there. And it just creates, you'd almost think you were drinking like an alcoholic milk chocolate. And I mean that in the best possible way, because it's not over the top at all. It's not like you actually threw brownie pieces in there. It's just the marriage between the barrel and the base beer that's causing that.
This is, first of all, also I just want to pack up the bottle, the packaging, the way they've kind of defined this beer as itself is so beautiful. Mm-hmm. I think it's absolutely wonderful. This does say that it is the original Bourbon Barrel-Aged Stout. So I wasn't just claiming that. If you have a problem with that, go to Goose Island. They'll defend themselves. Also says in the bottle that develops in the bottle up to 5 years. I myself have had this beer aged for up to 6, 7, 8, 9 years. Oh. It absolutely is delicious. The flavor profile that they're giving us is vanilla, cocoa, cherry, caramelized sugar, and almond. A lot of those notes I'm picking up here. And as it opens up more and warms up a little bit, we're going to get more of those flavors as well. What I go back to when I discuss what I love about Imperial Stouts and then bourbon barrel versions or any barrel-aged version of it is the fact that this beer stays relatively drinkable. There is not an overabundance of residual sugar. It's got the right amount of residual sugar. And we go back to the fact that you've got a beautiful color here, but you swirl around the glass and it doesn't stick to it like molasses. The body here is perfect. It's dead on. This is what you're looking for in Imperial Stout. The amount of bourbon there, the flavor of the bourbon and the flavor of the beer work together in harmony. The bourbon doesn't dominate it. It's just another great example of what balance and skill does in making a beer that I want more than one sip of. And a lot of Bourbon Barrel Imperial Stouts, a lot of over-the-top Imperial Stouts, I want one sip, wow, that tastes really good. And then please, I don't need any more. This doesn't do that.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to comment on after you said that is I would love to be part of their barrel selection. Because I imagine as you say, kind of as well as the beer and the barrel work together, they must have some crazy selection where they go off and just pick exactly the barrel they want. Because it really is. It's almost like if I didn't know any better, and maybe they do, but if I didn't know any better, I would almost say the way this pairs so well, I would almost assume that they go to where they get their barrels. It's already got the whiskey. They try the whiskey and then almost reverse engineer the beer because it's that complimentary, like you said, the sugar I think is perfect. So I would agree with you 100% there. And it's not, you can have, even with some of those beers that are way under attenuated, sometimes, unfortunately, as strong as barrels are, it's just all that sugar and then you get a whisper of barrel in the background. And this doesn't do that, or it's not the opposite. If you had like a really old school, maybe thinner Imperial Stout where sometimes a barrel can bulldoze or kind of roll it over. This is just that perfect blend, and they almost elevate each other. It's not like, I guess you would always know this is barrel aged because of the flavor profile, but it's so rich, especially nowadays. If you just hand this to someone and said it's a really good stout, I think they believe it because of how like there's not like nothing's split apart. You know, it's just perfect balance.
There's no hard edges here.
Yeah.
It's nice and soft. It's well integrated. A couple things here. One, this is over 14%. This is 14.6% on the label. This sounds strange, but it doesn't drink that hot. You know what I mean? And by the way, like when you're in 14%, it's hard like, oh, you hit the alcohol well. No, I mean, I would believe that this was 11, 12%, which is an accomplishment to get a beer that's 14% that drinks a little bit easier. Another thing I want to mention is that this was a brewery that was purchased by AB InBev, or at least a subsidiary of theirs. I can't remember, it was a long time ago that this happened. And there is always this perception that the moment that happens, all of a sudden the quality goes down. I've heard it a million times about a million breweries, and every now and then it's correct, right? I don't think the quality of this beer has suffered one iota. I think this beer is fantastic. They have kept up the quality of this beer even after the sale. I mean, hell, maybe the first year afterwards there was a problem. I don't know. Maybe. Tell me in the comments if you think I'm off base here. But when I'm drinking this beer from year to year or comparing it to what I remember from 10, 15 years ago, I think the beer is as good, if not better, than it ever has been. And the skill in making this beer and doing it over and over again, it's like flexing a muscle, right? You did it over and over again, the barrel selection process, the flavor, you get to know what you're doing. You cannot get to be perfect at something that you make once a year in 2, 3, 4 years. It takes 20 years. And I'm sure, Ralph, you can speak to that. You know, when you make one IPA once a year, or our Father Christmas once a year, you make the beer once, and then you had a year till you can make tweaks.
Well, yeah, and I was just gonna say that because even with one of our beers that we just made recently that was an IPA, I think this year's is eons better. But it took doing it, once last year, and then I had the advantage of I got to make, I think, a couple small batches after that. But yeah, it takes like 4 batches, in my opinion, like minimum, to just be like, okay, I've made like a solid beer. Because you'll hear people, of course, but which one's better? I actually
just gonna say that.
Yeah. But like, I don't know who.
It's almost never the case. What it is that your nostalgia for the first time you tried it made it the best thing in the world, and you don't realize that the beer has gotten better progressively over the years. That's just the way it really is. Objectively, from a brewer, well, not even a brewer anymore, a former brewer and an actual head brewer, that's absolutely the case. One thing I want to throw in here, now, Ralph, what would you're a food guy. This might be a tough pairing. I think a lot of people want to go, oh, let's just do, a chocolate dessert, right? And that's really, really simple. Do you have any recommendations of what you think would go well with this beer?
So it's funny you're going to say that, because I was going to even say that would be like most people's knee jerk. But one thing I could definitely see that stands out to me, if you had like some kind of smoked meats, because a lot of those, even the barbecues will already lean themselves with some of the sauces or dry rubs. They already lean to that. You'll buy like the bourbon flavored whatever.
Cherry
so
wood
that's
or something
so that's already like part of their makeup. So adding this to that would be like, as a pairing, would be beautiful. As well as something almost like an American chili, but like a chili con carne, like a Texas chili. I think that would go. Anything with like a rich roast character, even a pot roast, I would pair this. There's an Italian pot roast called La Genovese, or the pasta Sugro La Genovese, and this would go great with the hardiness of it.
So I'm going to throw something out here that you might disagree with, but I would love to do this with a gamey meat, because something that has like some real flavor and some real impact, and kind of like a peppercorn cream sauce.
Oh, yeah.
Something that has some real body and some real richness, because it's the complete opposite of what this has, body and richness, but this is giving you all that smoked wood and things of that nature, and a cream gives you some subtleness that can kind of bring the fruitiness out. I think that could be a really, really cool pairing for it. Even this a flavorful steak. I wouldn't do a filet mignon because it doesn't have any fat, isn't very flavorful. It's all about texture. A flavorful cut of meat with a peppercorn cream sauce, I think, would be freaking dynamite with this beer. Anyway, guys, thank you very much for sticking with us for this. Thank you for sticking with us for Old Favorite Friday every single week. We wish you a happy new year, and going into 2024, we'll be continuing to do a great beer every single week and telling you why you should be drinking it. Please let us know, just like people have with this beer, let us know what we should be drinking in the future so we can put that down. hopefully feature your beer. Please poke around to the channel, see longer conversations just like this one where we talk about incredible beers. Give it the love and attention that they so rightfully deserve. And we'll see you literally next year.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Cheers.